Everyone always has an opinion on the NBA Cup, right? Well, guess what? No matter what your opinion is, I bet you got a little bit more interest now because the Memphis Grizzlies have a chance to advance to the knockout stage. I'm going to tell you how that is possible. Plus, we're going to break down the upcoming matchup against the Clippers and we're going to talk Grizzlies injuries. All that coming up on this special Thanksgiving edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome to this Thursday, this Thanksgiving edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Happy Thanksgiving to all those who celebrate. I know something I'm thankful for. I'm thankful to be here with you guys to talk about Grizzlies basketball on today. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So head to FanDuel.com now to get started. Once again, thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with me on today, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, the number one sports podcast network in the land. So thank you for all the contributions that you bring to the show and helping us reach that wonderful mark there. But we got a lot to talk about in today's show. Make sure you try to stay here for the whole thing. Look, you know I'm a Packers fan. We got a big game today against the Lions, so I'm going to try to zoom out here, and I got to get to that food. But before we do all that, we got a lot to talk about in today's show. As I said in the opening, we're going to break down this Grizzlies Pelicans game. We're going to talk about the NBA Cup standings updates, what needs to happen in order if you want to see the Grizzlies advance to the knockout stage. And then, of course, we're going to talk about we're going to preview the game against the Grizzlies, the game between the Grizzlies and Clippers, as well as some injury updates. I saw it in the comment section on YouTube. Someone asked and said, we need some injury updates. And you know, I know a couple things, so we'll talk about that in this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. But first, we got to start with the win. Ooh, the Grizzlies had to sweat that one out. They had to sweat that one out. A 133-128 overtime win over the New Orleans Pelicans. It was one that Memphis needed to stay alive in the NBA Cup. Again, this was the NBA Cup game. It was one that Memphis just needed, period. I mean, look, going into that game with a 6-12 record, every win is vital at this point, and the Grizzlies took care of business. It was tough at times, and we got a lot of good to talk about, you know, from that game. There are a lot of great things that happened for the Grizzlies in that win against the Pelicans. But before we get to all the good stuff, you know, I want to touch on something real quick. I got to talk about this whole rotation discourse. And I don't know how people are going to receive this, but we got to talk about it. We got to have this conversation because there were several times in this game, you know, and I only can engage with the people who pretty much engage with me on social media. So some people may not have even noticed this or even cared about it as much, but I did see, you know, on social media, there was some kind of irritation with this. And quite frankly, this is something we've talked about. I'm talking about substitution patterns. This is something that we've talked about over the course of the season, you know, with Tomas Isalo and kind of his plan of attack from that standpoint. But it really stood out in this game because early on, Jaren Jackson Jr. comes out, boom, makes 3 3-pointers, and I'm like, he's rolling. Gets subbed out of the game at his normal mark about 4 minutes into the game. This is pretty much per usual. This is nothing out of the ordinary with the Grizzlies, but I know some people have had the problem with the fact that, man, when a player gets hot, he gets going, and you're yanking them out there just because that's what the game plan says before the game. And again, Jaren was rolling at that point, comes out of the game, did not make a shot, I think, for the rest of the first half. I think he finished the first half 3 of 8, but he definitely finished 3 of 6 from the three-point line. Did not make another three-pointer in the first half at that point. So there was this whole conversation about, man, did the Grizzlies take their own guy out of rhythm? Then there were a couple moments in the game. I believe it was Cedric Coward in the fourth quarter. He looked like he finally got going. Zach Edey had a stretch there in the fourth quarter. He got going. Then he got subbed out. He didn't sit on the bench long. But this has kind of been a familiar theme. And here's where I stand because opinions are just that. Opinions are that. And quite frankly, what I've learned is NBA coaches really don't care a lot about outside opinions. They evaluate themselves internally with the organization And they go from there. Now, a lot of times the outside opinions do align with what they feel like need to change. So with all that being said, here's where I stand on the rotation discourse. The end of the day, it is what it is right now. I know that's going to be tough to accept as a fan, but what I mean by that is, quite frankly, I have asked him about his rotations multiple times. Tomas Isolo. I've asked him about his rotations. I have asked him about his planning, rhythm versus feel over the course of the game. We've asked all these questions. And guess what? I will continue to ask, but at the same time, he has told us exactly how he feels about this whole thing. You cannot say that you don't at least know why he's doing these things. The confusion shouldn't be there. The confusion should simply be why he's doing it. And again, we will continue to monitor this as the season goes on. But here are a couple quotes, right? I'll go to a couple quotes. On, I believe it was November the 5th, I asked Tomas Isolo about, the question was kind of about putting Cedric Coward in the starting lineup. But he talked about how, the Grizzlies do not optimize their lineups for any individual player. What we do is build lineups for the whole 48 minutes. A lot of times it doesn't make sense to have, for example, all of your best on-ball creators in the same lineup. That's just some of what he said. So again, that goes to the point about the fact that he talks a lot about having collectivity through lineups. Here's another thing. I asked Tomas Isolo on November 18th about the balance between in-game adjustments with the minutes restrictions that certain players were on, Zach Edey and Cedric Coward at the time. And I think that is relevant because that is, again, a rhythm and feel thing. And there are several other times where I've asked these, and I can pull up those quotes. But look, we got a lot of good stuff that we got to get to after this. We got a lot to talk about, so I don't want to spend the whole episode just talking about this. But here's that quote. When we asked him about that, he said, "It's more so planning." And the question was, about going into game, if there's a balance between in-game adjustments and managing the minutes restrictions. He said it's more so planning because the minutes restriction with both guys starting is obviously something that you have to take into account, that you have coherent lineups right there, then, and then you try to maximize the minutes that they get, and they get in lineups where they can be effective. Again, goes to his point about having cohesion throughout the lineups. Also goes to the point about it's more so planning. That stood out to me. What that tells me, and what you have seen and what I have seen, is a lot of these lineups are planned. These are planned lineups. These are lineups, again, they go into the game. These guys play well with these guys. These are the guys we want to play with these guys. And that's kind of how they go about the situation. Do I agree with it? No, I think there's probably should be some in-game adjustments a little bit more, but he does make in-game adjustments. I won't take that away from him, but I guess it's not to the level that we're used to seeing with other coaches and things like that. So look, that's kind of what it is right now. I think he has explained his reasoning behind these things. There's another big quote that I'll talk about on another day where I asked him, a different question about it. And he talked about the fact that, look, players in the NBA now are kind of, wired to feel like they should play more and more minutes. But at the end of the day, the league is trending away from that. And that's kind of his perspective. So we'll touch on all this more, but that's my whole thing on the rotation discourse or whatnot. Now let's get into all the good stuff that came from this game. One thing that stood out to me was the Vince Williams Jr. and Zach Edey connection continuing to be really good for the Grizzlies. Zach Edey, 21 points, 15 rebounds. Vince Williams, 5 points, 17 assists for Vince. This comes after, a few days ago, less than a week ago, he had a 15 assist game against the Sacramento Kings. So shout out to Vince Williams, really taking advantage of the moment. He also had 2 big steals, one pretty much clinching the game. So he's doing it on both ends. Same thing with Zach Edey. Zach Edey was super impactful, was super important. Check this out. In a game that the Grizzlies won by 5 points, Zach Edey was plus 39. My former co-host, Sean Coleman, put up a stat. And he said, let's talk impact. Zach Edey's plus 39 is the best plus minus mark by a player in a game decided by 5 points or less in the regular season in NBA history. Zach Edey was plus 9, Cedric Howard was plus 24, Vince Williams plus 27, Jaren Jackson Jr. plus 10, and Jalen Wells was plus 16. Of course, John Conchar coming off the bench was plus 5. Every other reserve that played was pretty much high into the niggas. Cam Spencer minus 19, Jock Landale minus 34, Tavius Caldwell Pope was minus 22, Santi Aldama was minus 21. So this was a game pretty much that the starters won, and the starters closed the game. They were the guys who were in the game in the fourth quarter, in overtime and late in the fourth quarter, and closed that game out. It's also good to see Jalen Wells get it going. We talked a lot about the struggles that Jalen Wells had earlier in the season. Now he's put together back-to-back performances, scoring over 20 points. In this game, 9-11 shoot from the field, 5 of 6 from three-point range, 25 points. He had a clutch mid-range jumper in overtime. Shot clock winded down. Sadiq Bey was all over him. He might as well have been wearing him like a shirt the way he was guarding him. And, Jalen Wells gave him a pump fake, got him in the air, and just calmly just synced a nice mid-range jumper. So, good to see him getting it going. I know some people, we've been having these conversations about should he remain in the starting lineup, over Vince Williams when guys get healthy. He's making his case right now. He's making his case. Quite frankly, the way he's playing right now, I'm not even willing to have that conversation anymore. But Jaren Jackson Jr. also stepped it up. We talked about the struggles that came after, he got off to the real good start. But he finished the game 9 of 23 from the field, 5 of 11 on three-pointers. 27 points, a season high for him, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 steals. He also had some big plays defensively, again, 3 steals and a block for Jaren Jackson Jr. So it's good to see him kind of have that bounce back performance after he had the game that he had in the last game as well. So those guys kind of stepped it up for the Grizzlies. Those are the players that you need to step it up right now. And it was a good big win for the Grizzlies. If they would have lost, that would have eliminated them from potentially advancing in the NBA Cup. So good win for the Grizzlies. Speaking of the NBA Cup, we got to talk about that because the Grizzlies are one of the few teams still mathematically alive and with a chance to advance to the knockout stage. We're not used to talking about that here on Locked On Grizzlies. So we got to break down what that looks like coming up here next on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we get to that, today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, the NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of a game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head over to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Make sure you go check that out now over at FanDuel.com. We got to talk about the NBA Cup. Now, I'm excited to talk about this. I'm excited to talk about this, one, because by this point of the NBA Cup, the Grizzlies are usually irrelevant in past years. They've usually racked up a couple losses, and at this point, we're just waiting to see what 2 regular season games are going to be added to the schedule because, of course, if you don't advance to the knockout stage, they add 2 games onto your schedule against 2 other teams that didn't advance to the knockout stage. So that's kind of where we're used to being at this point, but the Grizzlies are still in the picture. The Grizzlies are still in the picture. Now, here's the layout. The Grizzlies group has already been won by the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers are 3-0, and they have the tiebreaker over the Clippers and the Grizzlies, the 2 teams in their division who are still mathematically alive with a chance to advance. So since the Lakers already beat the Clippers and since they already beat the Grizzlies, they won the group already. So the Grizzlies, more than anything, first and foremost, they have to beat the Clippers for a chance to advance to the knockout stage. But that's the least complicated part of this whole thing. Now you got to get into point differential. That's been the whole talking point, like about when this whole NBA Cup thing came about. Point differential. You see teams in blowout games still running up the score sometime, and some people, at first were having a problem with it, but point differential is a real thing. And the Grizzlies are about to see exactly why that matters. So here's a pretty much the landscape. The Grizzlies group, again, it has been won. So the Grizzlies only have a chance as a wild card team. West Group C, this is the group with the Nuggets and the Spurs, who are the only two teams from that group still alive. They play against each other on Friday as well. And they're both 2-1, just like the Grizzlies are 2-1 in group play. So the Nuggets and Spurs, one of them will automatically be eliminated from contention in total. So the winner of that game will win their group. And then there's the Suns and the Thunder in Group A. The Suns and the Thunder are both 3-0 in group play, which means the loser of that game and the winner of the Grizzlies and Clippers will be the two teams who will be fighting for the knockout round wild card spot. You get one wild card spot. You get three group winners, and then there's one wild card spot in the East, one wild card spot in the West. So here's the landscape. It's going to be the loser of the Thunder and the Suns, an upcoming matchup. They play on Friday as well, and it's going to be the winner of the Grizzlies and Clippers in a potential tiebreaker scenario. So what is the tiebreaker scenario? Well, it's pretty simple. One, it's point differential. And the Grizzlies are not in the best spot. With that being said, of those teams, now the Clippers have the worst differential, but looking at this from the standpoint of how the Grizzlies can advance, because if they lose, none of this matters. If the Clippers win, none of this is even relevant. But if the Grizzlies win, so pretty much eliminate the Clippers from that standpoint, because you got to win, you got to beat them. You don't have to worry about point differential against them. But the Grizzlies have a +9 point differential. Oklahoma City +71. I mean, that team's been so dominant. And then the Phoenix Suns are actually +35. Blame the Jazz and the Kings, because those are two of the teams. The other teams in West Group A with the Suns and the Thunder are the Jazz, the Kings, and the Timberwolves. The Jazz have a -94 point differential, and the Kings have a -57 point differential. To put those numbers in perspective, no other team is beyond -32 in the West. The Kings are -57, the Jazz are -94. So basically, the Thunder and the Suns just ran it up, on those teams. While the Grizzlies had to fight. Now, the Grizzlies are 2-1. Their actual point differential is +14. But in this format, I don't want to confuse anyone, it's +9. So the reason that is the case is because you remember the Grizzlies, when they lost to the Lakers, they only lost by 5 points. But they beat the Mavs by 14. And so that's a 9-point difference right there. They also beat the Pelicans by 5 points. So they've actually won. I mean, they have a 14-point difference between the three games. But here's the other rule in the NBA Cup that comes into play with the Grizzlies here. The Grizzlies won that game against the Pelicans in overtime. Overtime point differential does not count. It does not count. So basically, regulation point differentials are the only thing factored into NBA Cup point differentials. So essentially, once the Grizzlies game against the Pelicans went to overtime, that game counts as a 0 in the point differential column. So lost by 5 to the Lakers, beat the Mavs by 14, 9-point differential for the Grizzlies. Now it's just math. It's just math. The loser of the Thunder and Suns. Let's just keep it real. This is Locked On Grizzlies. We always say we keep it real on Locked On Grizzlies. If the Grizzlies are to have any chance, any chance at advancing to the knockout stage, you probably need the Thunder to win. The Thunder have a 71 point differential. Look, it would have to be some wild stuff. I mean, they'd have to lose by 30-something points, and the Grizzlies would have to win probably by 30-something points in order for the Grizzlies to kind of lap them in point differential. It would have to be pretty wild. So for the sake of realism, we're going to approach this from the standpoint of the Grizzlies have to beat the Clippers, and then they have to outscore the Phoenix Suns. They have to have a point differential over the Phoenix Suns by 27 points. Now, in this scenario, the Suns lose. So the Thunder beat the Suns. Now, not only do the Thunder have to beat the Suns, you need the Thunder to put it on the Suns a little bit. Like, they need to beat them good. Now, fortunately for the Grizzlies, that hasn't been a problem for the Thunder this season overall. The Thunder have blown out, most of their opponents. Like, I think if you go to their schedule up to this point of the season, I mean, they have the biggest point differential. Let's start there. They have the biggest point differential overall in the NBA. And going into the last game, they against the Minnesota Timberwolves, they had the biggest point differential in NBA history. NBA history. So they are blasting opponents, so to speak. Like, I think they beat the Timberwolves by 8 points. But before that, you got to go back. I mean, you got to go all the way back. You got to go back to November 5th. The last game that they lost, actually, against the Trailblazers, that was the last time they had a game that they didn't win by double digits. So they beat the Timberwolves by 8 points. But before that, you're talking about a stretch of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 consecutive wins by double digits. So there's a decent chance, which is wild to say, but that's just the Thunder. There's a decent chance that the Thunder are going to win by double digits. At that point, the Grizzlies just have to take care of business on their side and probably win by double digits too. We'll talk more about the Clippers in the next segment, but they're not some great team. Still going to be a tough assignment, but it is possible. It's going to take a lot. It's going to take you. You're going to have to probably cheer for the Thunder a little bit, and then you're going to have to cheer for the Grizzlies if they're potentially up 15 in the fourth quarter, to not let their foot off the gas and just go home with it. But let me know what you guys think as well, because it has to be a 27-point difference. So essentially, if the Suns were to lose by 13 points, let's say that. If the Suns were to lose by 13, you need the Grizzlies to win by 14 in the same scenario. So there's a lot at play, but let me know what you guys think as well. How do you really care? If the Grizzlies were to go, into this game, the NBA Cup, do you care about the result? Let me know what you guys think. And just for timing perspective, the Suns and the Thunder game starts 30 minutes before the Grizzlies game. So they have an 8:30 p.m. time local Memphis start, whereas the Clippers and the Grizzlies will start at 9 p.m. So a 30-minute gap there. So you'll get to see, if you're trying to do some scoreboard watching, you'll get to see that game play out first before we get the actual number on what the Grizzlies need to reach. But again, just let me know what you guys think. Do you really care? You just want the win? Let me know what you guys think in the comments on YouTube. But coming up here next on Locked On Grizzlies, we got to preview the Clippers game. Plus, we got to talk about some injury updates. I saw in the comments people were saying, what's the latest on the injuries? Let's talk about all that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we get to that, today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by DoorDash. Look, the NBA season is heating up, and DoorDash has found a way to keep fans in their bag all season long. Whether you're watching for the highlights, your fantasy team, or you might just be watching because of your favorite player, DoorDash makes every game night even better. DoorDash is the official on-demand delivery platform of the NBA, and they're celebrating with something called the bag drop. Every time an NBA player scores 50 points in a game, DoorDash drops 50% off your order with Dash Pass the next day, and you're automatically entered for a chance to win the ultimate fan bag. We're talking about player-inspired drip, exclusive gear, and then stuff you'll actually want. Like, look, it's not just food, and that's something I love. Like, even though I love food, I love that it's not just food. You can get everything from snacks, drinks, headphones, ice, even socks, all delivered. So next time someone goes off for 50 points, use the promo code NBA50 the next day to get 50% off on DoorDash with Dash Pass plus your shot at the bag drop. Dash Pass members only, 50% off up to $10 the next day after a 50-point game with the promo code. Terms apply. No purchase necessary. Ends April 13th. Open to U.S. residents 21 or older. Visit DoorDashInYourBag.com for full details. Again, the promo code is NBA50. DoorDash in your bag all season long. We got to preview this matchup between the Grizzlies and the Clippers. A crucial one for the NBA Cup standings, but even beyond that, since we spent a lot of time talking about the NBA Cup, it's another good opportunity for the Grizzlies to potentially stack up a win. This is not some great Clippers team, at least at this point of the season. They've dealt with some injuries and whatnot too, but they're an older team. I think they are the oldest team in the NBA. So injuries are kind of just part of what they're going through and whatnot. But very winnable game here for the Memphis Grizzlies. But everything with the Clippers starts with their dynamic duo, and that's James Harden and Kawhi Leonard. That's kind of where it starts. James Harden is having a kind of a resurgent year. He looks amazing, quite frankly, this season. We're talking about averaging 28 points a game, 27.9 to be exact, 8.4 assists. He had a 55-point game earlier this week against the Charlotte Hornets, and he's been rolling since then. He's on a roll. I think over his last 5 games, he's averaging over 32 points. So that's going to be an assignment. That's going to be a really tough assignment for the Grizzlies. We saw in that Pelicans game, the Grizzlies got into the fourth quarter. Fourth quarter execution kind of was a factor again. And the Pelicans really don't have the level of closers like a Kawhi Leonard and a James Harden. Kawhi also is back in the fold. He missed a lot of time for the Clippers at this point of the season due to an ankle injury. He's only played 8 games at this point. And again, look, the Clippers have struggled for a large part of this season. So I don't know how much, you could take into account, the fact that, yes, they have a 5-13 record, but quite frankly, Kawhi Leonard has missed, 11 of those games. He's missed 11. He's played in only 8 of them. Now, again, they also just lost with Kawhi Leonard on the floor to the Lakers, and they didn't look overly impressive in that game. And then they lost to the Cleveland Cavaliers a couple days before that. Both of those games were double-digit losses with Kawhi Leonard on the floor, so that is something to factor in as well. Another big matchup for this game is going to be between Zach Edey and Ivica Zubac. That's a matchup, and this is a matchup where if Zach Edey wasn't available, I would not like the Grizzlies' chances to win this game because Zubac, very, very dominant big man, averaging a double-double this season, over 16 points, over 11 rebounds. Without a guy like Zach Edey, you don't really have much of a chance, but Edey is coming off a game, again, 21 points, 15 rebounds against the Pelicans. He can hold his own in this matchup. So you factor in the fact that he can hold his own in this matchup. You got to have perimeter guys that can guard Kawhi Leonard and James Harden. This is where the difference comes into play. Now, with the Grizzlies having Vince Williams, Cedric Howard, and Jalen Wells in the starting lineup, they have 3 different guys they could throw at those 2 players. I remember last season, Jalen Wells being in the starting lineup, but it was Desmond Bane and John Morant, 2 super talented offensive players. But it was Jalen Wells, you got to guard James Harden. Okay, Kawhi just got hot. Now you got to go over there and guard him like it was one guy. But now you have multiple. Even when John Morant returns, you're going to still have potentially Jalen Wells and Cedric Howard to throw at these 2 guys and say, we have a guy that we feel decent about. You might not stop him. These are NBA all-stars. Like, you're probably not going to stop them. But you have the guys to make things difficult to the point where they won't be overly comfortable against you. So, look, this is a game, very winnable game for the Grizzlies. This is another game that I think potentially will come down to the fourth quarter. In that case, I do give the advantage to the Clippers because they have those closers in Kawhi and James Harden who have been there. But at the same time, the Grizzlies have done a really good job at executing. They've had a lot of 30 assist games as of late. We talked about Vince Williams, 17 assists in this game, this last game, 15 assists against the Kings, 3 games ago. So they're really doing an effective job of passing and taking advantage of the fact that, hey, look, we don't have a bunch of just shot creators right now, but we're making up for it with the way that we're moving the basketball. So that's something to watch it again. Now let's talk injury updates a little bit before we get out of here. If you made it to this point of the show, shout out to you because I wanted to talk about injury updates again because I saw it in the comments. Say, hey, we haven't got injury updates in a long time. And that's true. We've not talked about injury updates lately much on here because we've been breaking down all these things and all these different games and whatnot. But here's just kind of a general synopsis of where things stand with all the injured guys right now. We're going to start with John Morant, who is going to be reevaluated around the beginning of December. So I think as of today, it's November 27th. I think early next week, you can expect a reevaluation for John Morant. Now, as you've learned, as Grizzlies fans, reevaluation does not mean when a player is expected to return, but I don't think we're looking at a situation where John Morant will be 6 to 9 weeks, like the other guys who are going to be out. So we'll get a reevaluation on John Morant about a week, maybe a little bit less than a week from now. Again, around the beginning of December, look out for that. Javon Small, again, reevaluation in early December for him as well. Like I said, with Morant, it's going to be probably the beginning of December. Javon Small is probably, roughly December 6th, 7th, 8th, somewhere in that range, a few days later. So both guards, point guards, you get kind of a update on them relatively soon. This player, Brandon Clark, there is no kind of quote unquote reevaluation coming up with him. It's just when he's going to be back. And I think you can still expect Brandon Clark to be back in late December. I think that's kind of the time frame. Potentially early January. It could linger into early January a little bit. He was on the broadcast on yesterday on the FanDuel Sports Network broadcast. If you heard him talking to Rob Fisher, he said he's able to do everything now. He could run, he could jump. So it's pretty much that process of getting back into game shape, building yourself up, making sure there are no additional problems going on with that knee. So things are trending up for Brandon Clark. Again, I'm looking at the late part of December somewhere. This might be a Christmas gift, getting Brandon Clark back into the center rotation. Ty Jerome will be back sometime in January. It could be early January, but based on his timeline that he was given, remember it was a 6 to 9 weeks with him. It could linger into the middle, past MLK Day, up until I think around January 24th. So somewhere between January 3rd, January 24th is kind of the optimal expectation. But I think the best way to put this is sometime in January. Probably on the earlier side of January, I would suggest Ty Jerome will probably be back for the Grizzlies. Scottie Pippen Jr., that one is way down the road. He's still in the boot right now, and he's going to be reevaluated sometime in early January as well. So when he gets that early evaluation when he gets that reevaluation in early January, then there will be another update that follows on how much longer he's going to be out for returning. So Scotty is still a ways away. I think with the other guys, we have, somewhat of a clue potentially when they could be back. But those are kind of the injury updates that we have right now. Again, let me know what you guys want to know. Let me know what you guys think. And we'll continue to try to get that information and bring it over here to Locked On Grizzlies, as Joe Mullex likes to say, to our little small corner, of the world here. So thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with me on today. For your second listen, go find the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast. Josh Lloyd hosts the #1 fantasy basketball podcast, giving you daily tips and helping you win your league, all while making you a smarter NBA fan. Find the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Appreciate you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with me on today. Look, I got to go eat. I'm trying to eat good today. I got to go eat some dressing. I know some people call it stuffing, but, I'm a sweet potato pie guy. I know some of y'all like pumpkin pie, lemon meringue pie, whatever pie you like, but I'm a sweet potato pie guy, so I got to go get to that. I know some of y'all like turkey, but guess what? I like ham. So, look, I got to eat good today. I like my sides as well. So, look, if you celebrate today, go eat good, go have a good time with your fam. And again, tell someone you're thankful for something. I'm going to tell everybody that I want to tell I'm thankful for something today. And I'm telling you guys right now, I'm thankful for our small corner of the world, Locked On Grizzlies. Truly enjoy doing this with you guys. But until next time, remember that Locked On Grizzlies is free and available wherever you get your podcast. I'm Damichael Cole, and we'll see you on Locked On Grizzlies.